Welcome to my final Better Call Saul Season 1 episode review video, as this is the Season 1 finale. Before I get into that, though, pretty important, if you're not caught up to the point where I am and rewatching or watching Better Call Saul, or you're just not entirely sure, then you definitely need to take the initiative and pay attention to the episode's title, which of course I'll mention as well as put in the description. If that happens to be the case, you found that you're not caught up, it would be my recommendation that you don't watch this video any further to avoid any potential spoilers. I've already seen Better Call Saul all the way through at least one time. Just rewatching the show because I binged it initially until I got caught up with new episodes. Season 6, Episode 4 was the first live episode I watched. I want to see where this show sits on my all-time favorite shows of all time. It might be as high as number 6, but it will most likely probably be in the top 10. And if you want to hear me talk about this universe even more, I actually did do Better Call Saul Season 6 episode review videos when they aired live. So if you click right here with about 20 seconds left to go, you'll be able to see those. If you want to hear me talk about Breaking Bad, you can click right here for my Breaking Bad playlist. I do all the episode review videos, and I do seasons ranked as well as characters ranked. So if you want to see my other content, and El Camino will be in there as well. If you want to see that content, make sure you click on those videos. But let's discuss this awesome and amazing show. With that said, this will be Better Call Saul Season 1, Episode 10, the Season 1 finale. The title of this episode is called Marco, and this will be my review reaction recap after just finishing watching the episode. So, this is a flashback, and the majority of this episode is a flashback. Shortly after Chuck helps secure his release from jail, Jimmy stops by a local bar to say farewell to Marco, of course, his best friend and partner in crime. He tells Marco that he's moving to Albuquerque to work in the mailroom at Chuck's law firm. And then Marco kind of is like, okay, Chuck doesn't even like you, and, makes fun of Jimmy's decision, arguing that the move is a waste of slipping Jimmy's talents, but Jimmy's mindset is made up, and he leaves. Jimmy pays Howard a visit to officially hand... Okay, so back to present time. Jimmy pays Howard a visit to officially hand over the Sandpiper case to HHM. He also gives Howard a list detailing the errands that he'd been performing daily for Chuck. Howard is amazed at Jimmy's dedication to his brother and reminds Jimmy that he always had a soft spot for him. It wasn't him, it was Chuck that was the one that didn't want him at HHM. In the parking garage, Jimmy apologizes to Kim for lashing out at her when she advised him to take the deal. She gives him a hug, commending him on how he's handling the situation with Chuck, how maturely he's handling it. At the bingo hall, Jimmy calls numbers, gives example words for letters that are pulled. When a series of consecutive numbers all come up with the letter B, he mentions brother. His composure starts to unravel from the pain of Chuck's betrayal. He initially rants about the desert environment of New Mexico, and then that launches him into a story about his attempt at the Chicago sunroof, when his ex-wife's lover stopped at a ice cream store in his BMW. A drunk Jimmy decided to defecate through the sunroof of the man's car, not realizing that his children were in the back seat. This led to a trumped-up charges of indecent exposure, which Chuck had to fly to Cicero to clear, and then Jimmy says he's been paying for it ever since, before abruptly ending the game and storming out the hall. Jimmy travels to Cicero and arrives at his hometown bar, where he finds Marco. He's kind of dozing off. The two haven't seen each other since Jimmy's moved to Albuquerque, but Marco is thrilled to see him. Jimmy comments that he had been in town for his mother's funeral 2 years earlier, but he didn't have the time to check in on his friend. Marco seems to be disappointed that Jimmy did not visit him, and then after some more conversation, they fall back into old patterns and scam an obnoxious businessman at the bar by having this elaborate story to sell him a rare $50 coin for a very high price. Laughing and celebrating their reunion, Jimmy and Marco buy a round for other patrons of the bar. And then Jimmy and Marco spend several days gleefully pulling one scam after another. And then after a week-long binge, Jimmy wakes up in Marco's apartment to a disappointed waitress who was under the impression that he had gone home that she had gone home the night before with Kevin Costner. As he gets dressed, his cell phone falls out of his pocket, prompting Jimmy to check his voicemail, and he finds that he has 15 messages from clients inquiring about his elder law services. He tells Marco that he's a lawyer and it's time for him to go back to Albuquerque. Marco is amazed that Slippin' Jimmy is a lawyer. It's the ultimate way to scam folks out of their money. And Jimmy explains that he's not ripping anybody off. He's building a legitimate practice with clients who depend on him. Marco is unable to talk Jimmy into staying in Cicero for long term, but he reveals that he still has the watch from their Rolex scam and convinces Jimmy to pull one last con with him. Now that night they repeat the Rolex scam that they did before. Marco is waiting in the alley when he hears the signal. Jimmy and their victim howling in the middle of the night. As Jimmy and the victim approach, they find Marco he's actually unconscious, just as planned. Jimmy pokes him with the stick, but this time around Marco does not respond, and Jimmy realizes that Marco is actually unconscious and tries to call for an ambulance as the victim runs off with Marco's money, his wallet with his money in it. And then Marco wakes up, suffering from a heart attack, and then he tells Jimmy, "This was the greatest week of my life." A smiling Marco mentions to Jimmy before passing away, and Jimmy is just devastated by this. And then outside Marco's funeral service, Jimmy possesses Marco's pinky ring, which was given to him by his mother. Jimmy takes a call from Kim, who informs him that the ballooning size of the Sandpiper case has led HHM to team up with Davis and Maine, a law firm in Santa Fe. She tells Jimmy that the partners at Davis and Maine are willing to offer him a partner track position contingent upon meeting with him later that week. Knowing that she pulled some strings to make this happen, an appreciative Jimmy thanks Kim. And then back in Albuquerque, Chuck tells Ernesto, who is now the person that's going to be taking care of Chuck and all of his things that he needs, he tells him about the mistakes he made on his most recent grocery run and makes requests for the next delivery. Jimmy parks the car outside Chuck's house but doesn't make a move to go inside. Chuck catches sight of Jimmy's car, but is unable to gather enough courage to open the door and greet him. And then after exchanging pleasantries with Ernesto, Ernie is what he calls him, who Jimmy knows from the HHM mailroom when he worked there, Jimmy drives off, wounds still too raw to make amends with his brother. And then at the toll booth, Mike idly contemplates a crossword puzzle while on the phone with Caldera. He agrees to take on another underworld job and jots down a clandestine address, and Jimmy drives into the lot and passes by the booth without acknowledging Mike. He parks and then gets out of the car, stopping to check his hair one last time in the side mirror. He walks toward the courtroom, psyching himself up for his meeting with Davis and Maine, but then pauses. He closes his eyes and fiddles with Marco's pinky ring. For a moment, he stands in the middle of the parking lot, deliberating. Jimmy drives back to Mike's booth. He asks why they did not take Craig Kettleman's stolen $1.6 million for themselves instead of returning it. And Mike reminds Jimmy that it was he who asserted that returning the cash was the right thing to do, but Jimmy shakes his head. He needs to know what Mike's thought process was. Mike simply answers that he was hired to do a specific job, and he was going to complete that job. Jimmy considers, then replies with conviction. He knows what stopped him, and it will never stop him again. With that, Jimmy drives off. As he speeds away, he hums Marco's favorite song, which I looked up is called Smoke on the Water, revealing a small triumphant smile on his face. And that's what ends this episode of Better Call Saul and Better Call Saul Season 1. So altogether, I'm going to give this episode an 8.7 out of 10. I felt like even though I liked his character, we spent way too much time with Marco. This could have been shown in the other episode where they showed that scam with the watch thing. but it was still good. I gave it an 8.7 out of 10, and my character of the episode, besides Jimmy, obviously, is going to be Marco. He was a really good character. I just felt like this episode was more filler than a finale of a season. In my opinion, we got a little bit of stuff, but they really left a lot of stuff, just a couple scenes here and there, and that's it. So those are my thoughts on this episode of Better Call Saul, but I want to hear what you have to say. So if you're a fan of what I'm talking about and you like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad or El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, and you want to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, please consider Hulk smashing the like button, share this video with a friend, put this video on any one of your social media platforms. Don't forget to sound off in the comment section about what your thoughts are on this episode of Better Call Saul. What would you rate it? Who would be your character of the episode besides Jimmy? Remember to click right here for my Better Call Saul Season 6 reviews or my Breaking Bad stuff right here. And then last but certainly not least, don't forget to hit that sub button, subscribe to the channel, join the team, show your damn support, and be a part of something special. And you never know what you're going to see on JDF TV.